Once I had the awareness that my thoughts created my reality and that I could choose what thoughts I had in my mind, I could change my life. So every couple hours, I have an alarm set that says I am, and I do my I am affirmations, and they go kind of like this. I am aware my thoughts create my reality. I am brave. I am confident. I am determined. I am energized. And I go through the whole alphabet. It has changed my life, and I am going to be on a soapbox in every school, everywhere, every doorstep. I want people to know that their thoughts create their reality.
Yes, they do indeed.
Hello and welcome to the Conspiracy of Goodness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Linda Ulrich, founder of the mothership website of this podcast called The Goodness Exchange. Folks, we are in for just a real treat today with two guests, husband-wife couple, who have stumbled into a world of insight, and they are sharing it with the world now. Mariah and Byron are two new voices, shining a unique light on this topic of embracing and even celebrating neurodiversity. If you haven't come across the term neurodiversity, it is the fact that there are 20% whose brain pathways do not work like normal. And yet we have this world where all of us expect people to be normal. Now, this is eliminating a lot of the absolute wonder and potential that's in different ways that our brain pathways may work. Now, I'm referring to the way people experience in the world, the way we each react to things like body language, instructions, sensations, even lighting. It turns out our brains have this remarkable ability to be built different and still be an asset to society and each other and so forth and so on. Our guests, Byron and Mariah Edgington, are a husband-wife team who realized that something was amiss for years, but never knew what to call these challenging struggles they were having in understanding each other. And just about 2 years ago, they heard of this whole new world of neurodiversity, and everything started to make sense. And then they have completely thrown themselves into this process of helping others who are neurodiverse. Both have amazing professional lives. Mariah is a retired critical care nurse, and Byron was the helicopter pilot who flew the medevac flights where Mariah served others so remarkably. Now they have a book series. This is a journal. Here's a book. Here's the gratitude journal. I'm going to talk about all these things in a few minutes, but they are covering this topic like a rug, and so well in the last 2 years that Mariah has developed, just like that, 40,000 fans on LinkedIn. Now, this is obviously because if 20% of the population is neurodiverse, there is 20% on LinkedIn that have not been validated. That people are not looking at them for their potential. They're hoping they'll be normal. And we've got to totally get away from that societal expectation and start embracing what is possible. So that's a very long introduction for a very important new voice in the world. And I can only say welcome and thank you to Mariah and Byron Edgington.
Thank you, Linda.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. And it just popped into my brain right now. Speaking of the way brains work, I think it was Albert Einstein said you can't solve problems with the same mindset that got you into them. So here we are.
So here we are. That is such a great way to open this conversation, because it's something that's bothered me about the world forever. In fact, for the Goodness Exchange, I wrote an article called Every Brain is Beautiful when I learned about the work of Temple Grandin. Now, you guys probably instantly know who Temple Grandin is, but for folks who don't, she's been a renowned world scientist for 40 years, very neurodiverse, and one of the biggest advocates on neurodiversity. But gosh, that Temple is one of Time Magazine's most important 100 people of the century.
That's right.
And when I ran across her work about 7 or 8 years ago, I wrote an article called Every Brain is Beautiful. And it really opened my eyes up to what we are all missing when we don't embrace the folks who don't think like us. And I mean, their patterns of reacting to the world just seem different. That's a great place to start, Byron, because the one thing that I was going to mention right in the beginning was there's this problem for all of us knowing our place in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But when the world isn't embracing different ways that people's minds work, there's this whole population of people that don't know their place in the world, and they might not know why. And I understand that that's part of Mariah's story and then your own realization. Why don't you start us there? Tell us in just a couple minutes, give us the high points of this story of realization and experience that you guys have had.
Well, thank you, Linda. It has been a journey, and I know it is for many people who felt this for years, where you knew you didn't fit in and you weren't sure why. It was like somebody else got all the rule book and you missed it. It wasn't there. Now, I have been fortunate because Byron has been a supportive, kind, generous mate of mine for many years, actually 284 months, but that's a whole different section. And when we came about the idea of the neurodivergence, I had known that I had ADHD and dyslexia for many years, but did not put it together that this really was under that neurodivergent umbrella. And once I started looking at this and finding out more information about it, the pieces that were scattered all over the table started coming together. And it made such a profound difference in our life and where we went. It was like, oh, look, now there's still some pieces that are missing. We still haven't put it all together. But what we have learned about each other and how my brain works in the last 2 years has changed our lives, even at this late stage.
Yeah, even at this late stage, which obviously points up an important point. It's never too late to discover and explore this stuff.
Right.
But let me tell you a personal story about what happened around our discovery, if you want to call it that. We decided to collaborate and write a book together. Now, as a neurotypical person, there's another term for your audience. I'm a neurotypical. I'm this normal person. And when we started out our collaboration on the first Journey Well, You Are More Than Enough title, I'm a very linear person. I put one word after the other. I put one foot in front of the other. My railroad track goes right straight through the woods. And it turns out Mariah's railroad tracks are all around the neighborhood. And this caused some real tension. And we wondered what was going on. But the result was a beautiful book and a beautiful series. And one of the, yeah, that's right. Thanks for showing that. One of the upshots of the whole story, what I'm getting to is that people talk about, for example, Mariah has ADHD, which stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. But we have found that we disagree with that second letter in that acronym. She doesn't have a deficit. If there's something that she is absolutely focused on, it's like a laser. And now, back to the book, I was quite content with a lot of passages in the book, the way they were written. And Mariah took one of these, or several of them, and 2 or 3 weeks later, we're still waiting for the final word on this. And so finally, we had to just say, let's pull the trigger, send it to the editor, and be done with it. But my point is, when she is focused on something, the result can be really beautiful. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot more to it, but I'll share later.
Well, and then there's the word disorder.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can just talk about how it is. I have a neurodivergent daughter. My second daughter is an engineer. She's an incredible artist. She had a patent on a new kind of wind turbine by the time she was 21. You can only imagine how different this kid was going through normal high school.
Yeah.
And she just didn't fit in. And we didn't even realize the scope of this. We knew from the time she was little that she walked to the beat of her own drum, so we didn't have expectations. But this calling it a disorder probably stems from the fact that it is hard, doesn't feel ordered to deal with somebody whose brain works different than us. So it's disorder, not for that person, but for us.
Right.
Right? I mean, somehow this neurodiversity thing kind of comes back to us as the receivers, right? Because the neurodiverse person is just being who they are in the world or working really hard to keep everybody happy and
Right.
not really knowing where that destination actually should be. So before we go any further, I want to share the books. So this is the book, Journey Well, You Are More Than Enough. It's a beautiful book. You can see I've dog-eared many pages, and we're going to talk about some spots in the book. Then there's also the Journey Well guidebook. And I've also, this is full of like tips and tricks and things like that. And then there's also a gratitude journal, which I think, as from my pre-call, is a really, really important part of this self-discovery process. Is that we learn to we learn to appreciate ourselves.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, talk to us a little bit about your place in the world before you realized, like, even when growing up, you were bullied terribly, right, Mariah?
Yes, and I just didn't really understand why. And as I said, I didn't understand the rules of how I should act. And as is true with many, many neurodivergent people that I've spoke with, they were always kept outside the tribe. They were on the outskirts and on the fringe. And that's normal because for the feeling of a neurodivergent person, because we didn't get that social guide. We weren't sure. And even if we might have been told repeatedly of the norms and of the expectations, it still just somehow it didn't go in where it was supposed to. And so we ended up having to what we call neuromask, or we felt we did. And what neuromasking means, and I wasn't familiar with this term before we started this whole neurodivergent trail. I just knew, I guess I did this. This was common. Of course, I tried to fit in and I tried to blend by tamping down my real feelings and my real intuition in life and going with what I was supposed to do. I was trying to fit in. And so that mask was always there. And so that has been something that's been a little challenging for me to take it off.
Right. I remember in our pre-call, there was this moment that you guys told me about where you were realizing and just kind of having an awakening as a couple that you had been neuromasking. You had been trying to be what you thought other people needed you to be. Is that like a general good term for neuromasking? So you were trying to be what you thought other people needed to be. And Byron said, well, you don't do that around me, do you? Talk to us about that, because that's how it's going to work, folks, right? You're alone in this journey until you're not.
Until you're not, yes. And this is my side of this story, and I'm not particularly proud of my role in this. Going back, looking at it, because I ignored a lot of this, and back to your word, you were talking about order.
Yes.
To me, because she did things so differently, my chief desire came for her to fit in. No, you're out of order. And I prized order, and it just didn't fit. It was just like this all the time. And so my role in that has been in the recent past to really be a lot more attentive, a lot more aware of those episodes or whatever event is going on. And I have even started a few occasions, I've started asking Mariah, are you masking? I want to know this. It's very important because I love this woman more than my life. I want her to be who she is. I don't want to live with a stranger. I want to live with her. And so for those of us and your listeners who happen to be normal, neurotypical, it calls for a lot of examination.
Well, and it does on my part as well, because
Yeah.
I had to stop and say, well, am I masking?
Yeah.
Wait, I've done this for so long. I'm over 60 and I have always been this way. This isn't something new. It wasn't something I just developed. This is me. It's like I'm a woman. I'm neurodivergent. This is who I am. And so I've always tried to blend in. And so my mask is really tight.
And I'm thinking about, it doesn't have to be a spouse or a significant other in our lives that we're trying to work through this with. Ooh, it breaks my heart to think of
Yeah.
the children who are trying to fit in. And what I've noticed in my dental practice, some people know that I was a dentist for 35 years, and we are a very huge family practice, deeply connected to people's lives, not running people through like a assembly line, but we were very, very relationship oriented dental practice. So we knew very well folks that had neurodivergent children. And my husband and I just love diversity, period. Even before this was a thing, we would just find a way to celebrate the way everybody was. But, oh boy, it can be really tempting for parents to try and spend all their focus and time on sort of forcing a child to be normal. I've run across so many families who spent a lot of time and energy and services trying to help their kids be neurotypical. And Chuck and I would always recognize some great like savant thing in these kids. Like,
Yeah.
you'd talk to them about cars and they'd just light up. And at 9, they would know every single thing about a combustion engine. And the parents didn't seem to be recognizing this as a superpower. I remember one kid who would read like 80 books a month, and he was 14.
Yeah.
And the parent was very focused on every possible way to have this kid fit in, and just letting this obvious superpower just go by unnoticed. So, and gosh, we parents, God bless all of us. There's no manual, and we're always just trying to help our kids be as successful in the world as possible. So that impulse to have your kid fit in, so they aren't bullied, so they have the same job opportunities, all that's perfectly normal. But what I'm suggesting, and I think what your work suggests, is that there's room for both. We can help people who are neurodiverse understand society a little bit better so they don't feel like an outsider so much.
Yeah.
And the big potential here is in helping the whole world recognize that neurodiversity is just a landscape of possibility too.
Yes, it is. And we ended our TEDx talk recently, last April, with an expression from Emerson. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "To be yourself in a world that's constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment." And it sounds like a throwaway line at the end of a TEDx talk, but we really meant that, because society is all the time trying to make, not just neurodivergent people, but everybody, trying to make them fit into a box. And the other side of that is what Mariah and I have tried to do with our writing and everything we have done, our speaking, is that we need to get beyond the point of accepting these people. We need to explore these differences and celebrate them, because we need them and we need their input.
We need them. This is so true. Have you ever heard that statement? I'm not sure who said it, of a very famous quote. The thing that most serious complexities in society have, they have one thing in common: a lack of imagination. All right. So how we imagine solutions to problems that are vexing is we just get more opinions, more diversity, more points of view looking at this thing. And you're so right about this is the time in human history when we need to bring as much diversity of thought to everything that we are facing.
Yeah.
So, okay. And to that point, you and I both knew about something that came up in the news maybe about a year and a half ago. Did we decide, I can't recall, we are going to need to do some research on this, that one of the world's largest accounting firms announced about a year and a half ago that they were specifically going to look for neurodiverse people to join their institution, because they had this moment that people with a particular kind of Asperger's could focus like crazy. They were superheroes with numbers, and they just seemed to have exactly the right skill sets for the challenges of accounting. Yet, this company realized that their interview process was automatically shutting the door on these important people that could be working for them. Talk to us about that part of this story.
Well, it is interesting because it's true. Many neurodivergent people aren't able to commonly go through a process that's required to fit in society. One thing that, for some reason, we tend to have similar traits all along, and a common one is inability to look at people or to interact appropriately, or how society would say is appropriately. And Linda, it's interesting because I'm not sure if that comes from our discomfort or unexpected normal flow of conversation or whatever it is. That's a common thing where an interview would make us very uncomfortable. Personally, for me, I can say that I get extremely chatty when I'm nervous. In a most unusual way, I can bury myself quickly. And so that can come out in an interview. Some people have it where they kind of look down all the time because they're just not comfortable with that interaction. And so right away, the interview process is a very big challenge. It doesn't matter what our skill level is. And there are many examples from people about this.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I think this company realized that their interview process was actually interviewing for people they wanted to go out to dinner or lunch with instead of people that would be great accountants.
Yeah.
That's the gist. So they created a system that could look for all kinds of people, and that's
May
to
I
be commended.
add something to that? It was interesting in our exploration of companies and corporations. We did a talk for some COOs. We found a very interesting side note, and that was the people who they brought in as neurodivergent would stay with the company up to 98% more than others who didn't have this benefit. And the benefit was a buddy system. And the reason was the buddy was normal, neurotypical. And the neurodivergent partner was paired with them, and they'd meet like once every week initially, and then it spread out over time. But what happened was the neurotypical who was assigned to the buddy who was neurodivergent made them feel safe enough to thrive. They didn't feel like an outsider when they were with their buddy. And so even though maybe John, let's say, would have to stop his work every 10 minutes and tie his shoes tighter because he couldn't focus without tight shoes, that was okay. That was part of John. Yeah. But he was the best in his department. Yep. And once they found out that they could overcome John retying his shoes every 10 minutes, because that was part of his neurodivergence, that was something part of his, what we call stemming. We find different ways to stimulate ourselves, and that's a whole nother topic. But when companies look for the qualities that our neurodivergent brains possess and pair them up with somebody who's neurotypical, it's a win. It's a huge win. Because now, even though I'm neurodiverse, I fit in and I belong. And belonging is one of the biggest gifts that we can give a neurodivergent person in this world.
I've got goosebumps head to toe. What we're talking about here is so darn important. You're hitting on so many topics that are so lovely, because that person who's the buddy, they get something too. This is a win for them. They want to have a meaningful working life. They want to be successful in relationships. We all take away something wonderful when we help others. I mean, that the gift of giving is truly a gift for the giver as well, right?
To that point, the neurotypical person is the one who not only sticks up for that neurodivergent person, the neurodivergent person is not allowed to be the butt of anybody's jokes around the neurotypical person, because that neurotypical person knows the neurodivergent person on a personal level. And that makes them human in the whole company. And so the ripple effect is huge. And that's why those programs are so incredibly important and successful. And the ROI. Oh, yeah. So let's talk about the ROI. It goes through the roof when you have people like me in important jobs that they can do like that and not other people can. Their focus is like, oh gosh, yes, I do know how to do that. Mm-hmm. I'm really good at it. Yeah.
I want to talk about that because, you were a trauma emergency nurse, and I just can only imagine what this superpower of laser-like focus was like in saving other people's lives in critical moments. We
Yeah.
didn't want you to be checking your Facebook page or caring if anybody loved you at that moment. We just wanted you to be focused and everything else went away and you were saving our loved one's life.
Yeah.
Yes, and I would add to that because I've seen this happen. One of Mariah's biggest assets is her intuition.
Mm.
And I don't know if that's a function of her neurodivergence or not, I don't know, but I have seen it happen. And she has many, many stories of understanding, for whatever reason, intuiting what's going to happen to a patient, despite the fact that vital signs might be perfectly fine, the condition of the patient's, the nursing notes from before might have not indicated any kind of problem. Mariah has known on several occasions that there was something going on that everybody else had missed.
What I think that you're talking about there very well is how form follows function. Like you were this way when you were 2 and you maybe didn't get people's body language. You didn't get normal conversation feedback. So, and you knew that things were failing for you. So you probably got really good at picking up the most subtle, tiny inferences that something is amiss. And that probably translated to almost everything you think about.
Mhm.
So I can totally see how we can look at that as yet another almost superpower in the people that are neurodivergent in our lives. It's just a tiny example. We could probably come up with thousands if we had time to talk about that. And that is, I don't want to move away from this buddy system in this way that the world of work is coming to see the potential here. In that you said something in our pre-call that I loved. When I elevate others, I feel the boost. Talk to us about this journey that you've been on since starting to talk about this so much, because I think that's what's happened on your LinkedIn page, right? When I elevate others, you have talked and validated this way that people are different that wasn't happening on LinkedIn, at least not enough. And not only are you feeling the boost, but all those people are suddenly okay and they're welcome in the world.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, when I first started posting on LinkedIn in February of 21, I just started saying something simple. I agreed with people when they were talking about being enough and didn't want people to feel like they weren't enough. And so I said, own your value. And then I just say, you're enough. It's okay. You'll be okay. Well, this guy here one day said, no, Mariah, you're not enough. You're more than enough. And I went, you're right. I am more than enough. That's so true. And I didn't realize that I was kind of putting a limit on myself by saying I was enough.
Well, it occurred to me that it was like, hey, let me ask you, Linda, how would you feel if somebody said, yeah, you're adequate? That's what it said to me. And as a wordsmith, that just jumped right off the page at me. I said, no, the reason we tell people, and by the way, we have a lot of people who just really puzzle over that title because, and it's our subtitle. But when they finally get it, it's a beautiful thing because the word more has no limit. You can't define it. It's like soon. You can't pin down more. And we truly believe that about everybody. We have no limits unless, of course, we choose to put some on ourselves. And that's where that came from. So
I
that,
love that. I think that I can so appreciate the difference in you are enough. That seems like barely getting by. Again, it feels like you are normal,
yeah.
when when we all, neurotypical people and neurodiverse people, have a unique kind of alchemy that they were born with. Think of the billions of lives, all so unique, and there's a future where we can start celebrating our differences instead of focusing so much on the division. Woof, that's a whole nother topic also
Yeah.
that we could but we're not going to go down there. I got to tell you, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about some of these great insights that are in the book and some other things, these exercises that these guys have found. If I had known this when my neurodiverse daughter was growing up, I think I could have done even better. Who knows what's possible when we start nurturing the right things in each other. So we'll be back and can't wait to learn more. You know how the constant negative noise in our digital lives feels like it's reaching a boiling point? Now, many of us have tuned out the news and social media almost entirely. Well, it doesn't have to be that way. There are newsworthy stories about amazing progress, innovation, leaps in human potential, and wonders in the natural world, and they're just not reaching the top of our feeds. We can have access to this, but none of us has the time or maybe even the emotional stamina to search through all the doom and gloom news to find what's right with the world. Okay, enter the Goodness Exchange. There, we are giving instant access to positive news for curious people. Did you hear about the recent Harvard study that found that exposure to just 4 minutes of good news can make you 32% less anxious and 18% more optimistic? Well, I don't know about you, but I need those kind of numbers in my life. So, if you want to live with more joy and way less fear, it's really simple. First, you join us at the Goodness Exchange. Everyone around the world has the opportunity to access this kind of content. And we've promised no politics for about a decade, so you're safe from all that distraction as well. Second, you allow this new, more positive, balanced worldview to put a spring in your step again. It can change the way you react to your kids, your coworkers, everybody you come in contact with. And the stories we write about can make you the idea person in your circles. These challenging times call for us to wake up and take control of our perspective. The people who use the Goodness Exchange have the ability to react to the harshness of the world much different because they know way more about what's right with the world. And that's a resource. So subscribe to the Goodness Exchange, our YouTube channel and the podcast, and use this content to live a more expansive worldview. It is still an amazing world out there, and you can be a part of it. Welcome to the Conspiracy of Goodness. Okay, we're back with Mariah and Byron Edgington. They are some fresh voices in this world about opening up the possibilities once we really realize that 20% of us in the world have brains that don't work like the typical brain, like the normal brain. And that instead of thinking that everybody has to be normal, we could start embracing everybody and all the kind of superpower, the kind of unusual pathways and opportunities that this could lead to when we embrace diversity in our neuro pathways. And I want to move into these books that they've written and some of the insights there so that folks can know what to do next. If you're fired up about this conversation, you point out that people that are neurodiverse are very afraid of making mistakes because probably they, as a child, they were punished for not picking up on the rules. You keep saying that you didn't understand the rules. Mariah, you said very often the one thing holding you back from the exploration of this amazing life that you might have once you embrace neurodiversity is the fear of making a mistake. Talk to us about that.
I think everybody, well, I assume everybody has that fear of messing up and not being good enough. But in the neurodivergent brain, and I speak for myself, but also having spoke to many people who are neurodivergent, it's exponentially higher because we're always wrong in our mind, and we tell ourselves that over and over and over. We hear this, oh, you're so stupid, or oh, why can't you just be normal, or oh my God, I can't believe you did that. And it just goes in deeper and deeper and deeper as you grow up. And so you internalize that. And so, of course, my biggest thing is that through mindset and shifting my mind, I've been able to weed all that out. I'm so proud of that, but that's another part of it. But for many, many, many years, over 60 years, I was convinced that everybody was watching every little step I took, waiting for that next misstep. waiting for me to screw up once again, because I did it over and over. And if I kind of had maybe something that I thought I'd messed up on, in my mind, I made sure I knew that I had screwed it up royally. I have spoke to many neurodivergent people who feel the same way, that they just know that the next thing they do is going to get scrutinized because it's so bad. And that's unfortunate. And that's why I am excited to teach people how to gain the confidence that now I have, how to know that they are a lovable person, how they have so much worth intrinsically. And that once they can just shut down that negative voice that's been drilled into them, they can change their life.
I can't hear you talk like that without thinking of what a complex world it must be to navigate for kids. Because they already start behind the eight ball. They already, are under whatever family pressures they're under, or, whatever social pressures. Oh gosh, how this works for 20% of our population with regard to social media and this drive to be perfect and better than normal. My gosh, that must be a whole world of trouble and pain for somebody who's using some diverse pathways. Talk to us about this exercise called I Am. Here's just one of the tips that is in one of these books.
Well, okay, so I feel like I'm talking too much now. But this one is on me. I discovered this I work with a mentor, a mindset mentor. And one day, I had been doing for years and years and years, I'd followed Louise Hay, and she talked about doing mirror work. And something that I also knew was important was I am, and the words that followed it. But through this mindset coach that I work with, or mentor, I found out that whatever follows I am follows me. And so whatever I say after I am becomes my reality. So once I had the awareness that my thoughts created my reality, and that I could choose what thoughts I had in my mind, because no one else gets to control what goes on in my brain, in my head, in my mind, I could change my life. And it has. And now I do an alphabet and I do it every couple hours. It's a very powerful thing. And I know if I don't do it, that I go down the hill quickly because of all the society stuff that comes in. Yeah. So every couple hours I have an alarm set that says I am, and I do my I am affirmations, and they go kind of like this. I am aware my thoughts create my reality. I am brave. I am confident. I am determined. I am energized. And I go through the whole alphabet. But here's the thing. In my neurodivergent brain, I also have dysgraphia. And that's where I don't follow it's different for different people, but for me, I don't follow the alphabet in the normal way. And I get confused and hung up on it. And initially, I beat myself up over that. And now I stop and I go, okay, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, O, H comes next. Oh, okay, great. I am healthy. I am happy. I'm inspired. I'm insightful. And I just keep going. Wow. But it has changed my life, Linda, and I am going to be on a soapbox in every school, everywhere, every doorstep. I want people to know that their thoughts create their reality.
Yes, they do indeed. Yeah, and I should, a little addendum to that, if I may. I can tell if she goes a day or two without doing that exercise.
Oh, yeah, if I go an hour or two.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And also, here's a little plug, if I may. On our website at mandatetoelevate.com.
Okay. Can you say that again? That was quick.
Mandatetoelevate.com.
Okay, great.
And on that website, Mariah has put a free PDF download of the I Am exercise. And it's right now, because of various things that have happened, We have had it translated into 15 languages. It's there. Anybody who needs it, download it and start doing it. And truly, I mean, it sounds magical, but it will change their lives.
All right. That is in this book. That's one of the questions I was going to ask you about. Okay. Now I want you to share a good tip, Byron, because you told this wonderful story about when you guys try and get out of the house. Talk about, the train track that goes like this, and you are like this, but you've learned to work with that. Talk to us about that.
Well, I'll, by way of mentioning our TEDx talk again, bring that up.
Yeah.
In our TEDx talk, I mentioned that very topic. And I said that I had learned to take some light reading with me into the car, like War and Peace or something like that. Because when we went to leave to go anywhere, across town, wherever, Mariah is still, to this day, even though she's aware of it, she just cannot get out of the house. She has to go back in 2 or 3 times. She figures things out and she brings things along that, of course, we need. And I'll tell you an example of that. We were about to leave on a long trip to drive. In fact, we were driving to Florida from Iowa, which is another story all by itself. But we were about to go on a cruise where we were going to speak on this cruise ship. And we had almost, in fact, I think we were in the car, I believe.
No, we were in the kitchen, and I said, okay, wait. We've got to figure out, is there anything we're missing? Because we threw stuff together.
The car was packed. It was gassed up.
He said, no, there's nothing.
Let's go. Let's get on the road. And just like that.
I said, the passports. It was an international cruise.
Yeah.
And we just realized, oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so this is one of the reasons that I have learned to just pay a lot of attention to her intuition and her ability to take her time and make sure everything is right in place. Yeah. So,
but meanwhile, you've got War and Peace in the glove compartment of the car, just in case.
Just in case, So,
we're laughing about this, keeping a book in the glove compartment, but these are the considerations that can make life less stressful. If we just get it, you are not going to change this wonderful mind that you're sitting next to, and she's not going to change you. So you might as well find some place in the middle where you can be creative and find these workarounds.
Yeah.
Here's another one from the book. You talk about having a vision board, and why is that important? Talk about the vision board and why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is in a way, it's kind of similar to the I am exercise, because we firmly believe, and we have a mentor who is walking us through all this stuff. People don't realize how much our mindset drives the bus. Our mindset rules our lives. And there's nothing wrong with a lot of what we do, but if we don't question our mindset, if we don't question our assumptions about things, then we do the same things all over again. And so the vision board, where the vision board comes in, is if you tell yourself, well, I'll start at the negative part of it. I don't like doing that, but I'll mention that. Yeah, I think it might have been Henry Ford who said, whether you think you can do something or you think you can't, either way, you're right. And so where the vision board comes into this is what we tell our subconscious is possible for us is entirely possible. That removes those limits. It takes the limits away and allows the possibility, whatever it is. And so and by the way, we think in pictures. The human brain thinks in images. And so when you take what you really want, paste it on a vision board, and look at it all the time, the possibility of those things coming into your life increases exponentially. And the other side of it, again, back to the negative side, think of it this way. If you say, I am never going to fly my own plane, then of course you're not going to.
That's right.
So why not give yourself the possibility of doing whatever it is you want? Doesn't matter And our mentor says, if your goal doesn't scare you, it's not big enough.
I like that. I think I'm going to fly my own plane
Okay.
to see Linda.
There you go. There's a great goal.
All right. So on that note, I want to talk to you about some points on other points from the book. All right. I think this is very relevant. You say, sometimes when you lose your way, you find yourself. Why don't you talk to us about that concept?
Yeah, well, that kind of comes back to mindset in a way, because instead of just doing what you've done every day of your life, the same thing over and over again, if you start to question that mindset, why am I doing this? Why do I believe this? What happens there is we come around to what we think is the most important. This is, Mr. Emerson would appreciate this. It's not what we do. It's not who we associate with. It's not the books we write. It really ultimately comes down to who we really are. And so when you lose your way in the normal trafficking of life, it's entirely possible you're going to figure out who you truly are and what path you're on. It may be the only way to do that.
So maybe when people who are neurodiverse stop trying so hard,
Yes.
they might find what they actually needed to be searching for all along.
Yes.
One of the exercises that is not in the book, I don't believe. I knew this exercise before we wrote that. And that is so valuable. It has been, and it can cause a lot of tears because it digs down deep. And that is the why exercise.
Okay.
Are you familiar with that, Linda?
No?
Yeah.
The
Sure.
word why can be very profound when we start opening ourselves up to the potential. So, why did I allow myself to be bullied? Well, what do you mean, why?
Mm-hmm.
Well, why? Well, why do you think that way? Well, I don't know why. And so you start peeling the outside back and you start looking at, instead of thinking it was them against me, sometimes I've found it was me against me. And I didn't even realize it until I started saying, yeah, I am more than enough. I'm a beautiful person inside and out. And I can express that. I didn't have the confidence 2 years ago that I do now. And 5 years ago, Linda, I would have never been on this podcast with you, ever.
Yeah.
And so I can tell you unequivocally that some of these exercises that I have learned over the last 2 years are life-changing.
Mhm.
And I've found this amazing human inside that I know is inside every single person in the world.
So I'm easily making this connection between the vision board and the part that we just talked about. And then I'm seeing another part in this book that I think is really relevant, the I don't have to list. So there's the vision board, there's the why exercise, and there's the I don't have to list. I think that they're all part of the recipe of some freedom. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, it does. That freedom's a good word, Linda, because what we're talking about there, more or less, is boundaries.
Mm.
And this, in fact, this is during the holidays, let's say, for example. Everybody knows that during the holidays, there's a lot of stress. There's a lot of expectation from family and friends and associates. There's a lot of expectations. Yes, you will show up at the family party or the family whatever.
Or no, you can't come to it.
Or no, you can't come to it. But in any case, there's a lot of expectation, and it may very well be that it's not who you are, and you have yet to create the boundaries that are durable enough that you can enforce those boundaries without a great deal of stress. And so that's what we're referring to there is, I don't have to fill in the blank. I don't have to go to that party. I don't have to go to the movie with fill in the blank. I don't have to, whatever it is, I don't have to eat that because da. And again, it comes back to choices. And the boundaries are enforced only by making good choices for yourself. And that's really, really hard sometimes. I'm not going to dismiss it because it's very difficult. But
there's a little part of masking
yes,
in that too.
that's part
And
of it.
that is if you go back to your family gathering as an adult and Aunt Jill comes up or Uncle Jake comes by and they say, "Of course you like that. You've always eaten that." And you say, "You know what? I never liked it. But as a child, I had to eat it.
Mhm.
I don't like that at all." That is a reality that you can accept and say, "It's okay.
Yeah,
No, thank you.
yeah, maybe I'll learn to like it.
No, thank you. Don't
Yeah.
want to do that anymore."
I have to say, in the book, you give some really important ones that I don't want to miss mentioning in this
Okay.
chat. You say, "I don't have to respond to that text."
Yeah.
You say, "I don't have to add to that Facebook thread right away, and maybe never. I don't have to lend her money, assuming that it's gone forever. Or I don't have to go to parents and siblings events." I mean, these are some real realities in most of our lives, whether we're neurotypical or neurodiverse. But I imagine all of that's a lot harder if you're always trying to find your place in the world.
Yeah, and I
Okay.
should mention here too, there's a part of that that Viktor Frankl, Dr. Viktor Frankl, and you're probably familiar with this quote,
Absolutely.
but he said between stimulus and response, there is a gap. And I'm just summarizing, but essentially what he said was, in that gap, we find our freedom and our liberty.
Yes.
And what that means, especially when you're talking about social media, for example, taking that gap, doing what your mother used to say, count to 10. It's pretty simple. And once people realize, and I think this is especially true and I'll get to the neurodivergent part of this in a second, once people understand that they don't have to do that they have the freedom and the liberty to not respond, I think that's a huge step.
It is such a huge step. And I think of the nearest person I know, my daughter's feeling of obligation to participate in a social scene, whatever it might be, that she doesn't understand or appreciate. It's this constant tug about what to know what to do next. And you even say, which I love, make a list of the recent yeses that you said where you probably should have just said no.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That is a wonderful piece of advice.
It's a good example. One of my favorite authors is a woman named Anne Lamott. And Annie Lamott said, "No is a complete sentence." So if we can just assimilate that sentence from Anne Lamott, life has to get easier. And that's, I think, especially true. I can't speak for neurodivergent people, but I think it's especially true for them because, as Mariah said before, when they're wearing a mask, the impulse is to just agree, to just try to fit in.
How do you see that, Mariah?
This is a complex issue for me because for years I did what I was what I thought I was supposed to do. It wasn't comfortable. I don't like to be in social settings. From the appearance now, I look like an extrovert because I really do enjoy now talking to people because I feel like this message is so important. I have to share it. I feel like I have to. I'm responsible for all these people who need to know this message. But before, I hated being in social settings because I knew I was going to screw up. And I didn't know how to not be there in the right way.
Mm.
So it's a challenge for many people who are different.
Mm-hmm.
We don't fit in. We never fit in.
Okay. And for some reason, probably throughout human history, fitting in is the goal. fit, and you can see this. My listeners know that I refer to our prehistoric selves so much because, whenever I can't get my head around a topic, I think of what it must have been to live 35,000 years ago and be neurodiverse. Can you imagine when you were walking around the plains of Africa or the woods of Northern Europe in the cold and, having to rely on your little band of 19 people? They know that we wandered around in bands of 19 to 35 people. And then you're the outsider. You're the one that doesn't fit in. And my listeners also know that that I've had several neuroscientists on this program that have talked about the fact that we haven't had an upgrade between our ears in about 35,000 years. So we're still walking around with very old hardware between our ears. And we're trying to apply a whole new world and using that old software. So when I think of this, I think, wow, what if we flipped it? What if that neurodiverse person was the one who, like you say, had some instinct that told them, yeah, those berries might be really good on that hill, but I get this creepy feeling when I go up there that there's a saber-toothed tiger just waiting to jump one of us.
Yeah.
Or what if that neurodiverse person is the one who can stay up late around the campfire while all the really tired hunter-gatherers gets a good night's sleep? Or whether, in society, it just points to the fact that this is probably the way our brains have worked for thousands of years, hundreds of thousands.
Yeah. Well,
And we're just now waking up.
yeah. No, I think you're onto something. And there is research being done there's a reason that those markers are still on our DNA.
Right.
And they are all based on helping us survive. Because, brains, we didn't evolve to think. That's not what our brains were designed to do. The brains were designed to keep us alive and safe.
Survive. That's it.
That's it. The thinking part came a lot later.
Right.
And so it's possible, and I'm more than willing to accept this thesis. There's a reason those people had those markers on their DNA, because like you said, they had something that the rest of the tribe didn't have.
Right.
That was evolutionarily beneficial.
Absolutely. And to be clear, what Byron is referring to is that we know in science that we lead with our amygdala. That's the part of our brain that is always looking for danger and disorder. Danger and disorder, anything out of place. It served us if our amygdala was really powerful and we led with that. But what Brian's talking about is this part of our brain instead that's about how we make choices, and that's about collaboration and future thinking and all that. We can shift up to that part of our brain too. All right, so we're talking a lot about a lot of academia around this topic. You guys mentioned that there's a course at UConn called Neurodiversity 101.
Yeah, that's
Talk
true.
to us about that.
Yeah, well, we mentioned that at our TEDx just shortly. And I've not seen it, of course. I'm not familiar with it. But it's something we came across in our research for our TEDx talk, was that there is actually a course, and I don't know if they still teach it or not, but it's a good trend, if nothing else.
Yeah, it's a good trend. Well, I think we're talking about, a world of difference that's going on here as people like us are having conversations, as people who find this conversation interesting or relevant to their lives. Remember that if there's someone in your life who you don't understand, if you find yourself going, I just don't understand her, him, well, maybe this is what we're talking about. Maybe they're reacting to the world as they see it, and you're reacting to the world as you see it. And when we realize that we can be built different ways and still get along and even thrive better, this topic is relevant to all our lives. Yeah. So talk to us about a few more topics that came up that I just want to share with people. You have a great story about when you were nursing and you were sitting on a patient's bed or not sitting on a patient's bed. There's a neurodiversity thing happening there.
Well, I did that frequently where I just felt comfortable. And I mentioned that I felt uncomfortable when sometimes in social settings, but in the nursing realm, I felt totally at ease and speaking to patients about just about anything. And so I was very comfortable sitting on their bed speaking directly to them, doing education things, because I knew the importance of someone understanding what their diagnosis was, what they had for instructions moving forward. And I know, and as you know, and you mentioned this in your dental practice, that when you can relate to somebody, that understanding is exponential. It just grows. When they feel they're being heard and understood, it changes how they respond for anything. And so that was one of my superpowers, was the ability to connect with people in that way. And I found that their response to the instructions that I gave, their families, even if it was somebody who came back to us, would say that because I related to them so much, they actually took action on the things that we talked about and followed through.
Mm-hmm. And you had a great little story about a prison inmate.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
So that story was really interesting. There were a lot of times I worked in a public hospital, and we would get prisoners in our hospital system, and they would come with a guard. That was a normal procedure. And so many of the nurses would talk with the guards, but not the prisoner, who was the patient. And there again, my neurodivergence probably worked in my favor, because I didn't see the prison. I saw the person. And because of that, I treated everyone the same. Now, in this situation, I wasn't with prisoners. There's set rules, and you cannot sit on their bed and you can't talk to them in that way. But I made sure that when I went in and spoke with this person, that I made eye contact and I spoke directly to them as another human who had a light inside them. And innately, I was kind to my patients, and I really wanted them the best care to be given. I wanted their interest and their health to be the main focus. And so I had an interaction with this patient who most people were very uncomfortable with. And after I left that patient's room later on, one of the guards approached me and said, "I just wanted you to know that I've never seen any nurse interact with a prisoner in this way, and it changed how I feel about the prisoners, because it made it obvious that you were interacting with another human on a deeper level, because everybody's life has value and worth if we look for it.
Yep.
We are not what we have done. Our past is in the past. Many, many people, regardless of the atrocities that they have done to somebody else or had happened to them, they cannot change that, but they can change themselves through differing works. And especially now, I know mindset work. We can change our lives and our trajectory. So I think giving each other a lot of grace helps a lot of people.
That's lovely. It's super lovely. Okay, as we wrap up here, I want to mention a few things that I'm going to turn people on to in the actual article. So I've been taking all these show notes for us, but over on the Goodness Exchange, you're going to find there's a full article built around this podcast. We're just not doing a podcast here. Over on the Goodness Exchange website, there'll be all these links to things that Byron and Mariah and I have mentioned. So you can keep going deeper and deeper. A couple of things I wanted to mention was that you've heard us mention the famous, wonderful Dr. Temple Grandin. If you're interested in a few comments that we've made, you're going to love that episode. As I mentioned, she is the 40-year champion of neurodiversity in our world. And she talks about thinking in pictures, which is something you mentioned, Byron, And I think people who like this interview are going to love this interview with Temple Grandin. I'm a big fan of Temple Grandin's, and it's like you're sitting in her kitchen with her. It's just such a great, fun interview. And another one I want to turn people on to is an episode that will have come out by then with a wonderful man named Ronald Young Jr. Ronald is a podcast producer, a general video and audio producer, and a host, a very famous host in this world, who has a podcast called Wait For It about WEIGHT. And it's very interesting. A lot of the concepts that you're talking about, that you two are talking about with relationship to self-awareness and embracing who you are for exactly who you are rather than trying to be normal, is what Ronald and I talk about in this interview about weight and all the craziness that goes on around body size. So while it doesn't seem like it relates to the conversation you and I are having, it absolutely does. If people like this interview, they're going to like the thoughts that Ronald is bringing into the world, fresh thoughts about how we accept others. And that's just what we've talked about for an hour and a half, is accepting others for exactly who they are. And nothing is normal. Nothing needs to be. We don't need to embrace typicality. We need to actually, in these times, bring out all of our stuff to the table and share whatever we can. So how about you guys share with us exactly what people can do next? I've mentioned the book and the book series. I'm going to say that again. Journey Well. You are more than enough. There's all kinds of attitudes there. What's the website?
Yes, the website is mandate2elevate.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you can connect with them there. They're doing a ton of public speaking. They want to do more. They are in this mode where they're willing to share and validate and intersect with anybody who wants to elevate this topic in the world. So if this interview had just been 3 minutes long, we all read the news or go on social media or whatever, and we put our head in our hands. Knowing what you know from the journey you've been on, what do you really wish people knew?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I guess if I had to distill it down to a very short, it's going to sound simplistic, but I really do wish people understood that they are more than enough, that they have no limits. That's the message. And I guess beyond that, and we didn't go into the reason we named our operation Mandate to Elevate, but let me do just a little bit of that now.
Yeah.
Because in our careers, I was a pilot, Mariah was a nurse, we spent our careers lifting people up. It wasn't what we did, it's who we are. And that's where the word Mandate to Elevate came from. And we think everybody has that mandate. We believe it is a conspiracy of goodness, and I'm happy to be a part of that conspiracy. We have an obligation to lift other people up. And if people doubt that, I always mention that it's kind of a selfish thing. Because when we elevate someone else and make them feel good or better or understand that they are more than enough, it makes us feel so darn good. And so in a way, it's kind of a selfish impulse.
No, we all know that. We just all know that. We have little examples in our lives every day of that. The other day I was in the gym working out, and when I came in, the guy that was kind of like the room monitor was having a shouting match with the fellow that was going to help me work out. And after I was leaving, he actually took me aside and apologized. He was like, I shouldn't have been behaving like that. And, I could have just accepted his apology. But you know what I did? I told him a story of once I let loose at the John Deere dealership about how angry I was about my lawn bagger. So I told him a story. I could have just said, yeah, thank you for apologizing. But nope, I told him a story on myself. To this day, 20 years later, they still have my note of apology on the bulletin board at this John Deere dealership because I was such a jerk to them that day. I don't even know what my day was like. But I realized that, and I wrote them an apology note. And once I was over there recently, and I said, why do you still have my note on your board? And he says, because people yell at us all the time and no one apologizes. Yeah. We think that they feel bad. So he was like, we think that they feel bad, but they don't. And this just reminds us that people can let let themselves go and then still feel badly about it and apologize. And I think what we're talking about here is, I could have just left that guy with a thanks for apologizing, but I told him a story on myself where I'm what I'm embarrassed about my own behavior and how we're all in this sort of these momentary flashes of not our best selves. And the guy sat up a little taller.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you this story because it made me feel good to make him feel taller.
Yeah.
So maybe that's something to leave people with, is that there is this future ahead of us where everybody can walk tall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else from you, Mariah, that you want to make sure we get said today?
I think that is so important, that when we find that we can validate ourselves and others, it changes the world and it makes it a better place.
Lovely. These are great sentiments. Thank you both so very much. This is going to be a lovely long episode on the Goodness Exchange Conspiracy of Goodness podcast, and we will savor every minute of it. And I'm hoping you'll join us to read the whole article about this and find all these links to all this. I'm going to also give people a link to the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. You mentioned that. Thank you so much.
And
all right. Well, go ahead, Byron.
I plug one more thing here, if I may.
Yes, absolutely.
Mariah has a mentorship group. And it's called Path to Confidence. And that'll be, all the information is on the website. So we encourage anyone who would benefit from that, which is just about everybody, in my heavily biased opinion, to look that up, because it's a wonderful effort.
Okay. And that will be on your main website, not a separate website.
That's right.
Okay. All right. I'll put a link to that too.
Thank you, Linda.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much. Now, I hope that all the goodness and progress that Byron and Mariah I have shared with you today will carry you through your week, that you'll start looking for the people in your personal life and your working life who may be in that one of 5 people that are neurodiverse and who need somebody just like you to be their buddy. All right. Have a great day, everyone.